Good evening, all, and welcome to the Resilience Theatre Group's production of The Importance of Being Earnest. My name is Jacob Garwood, the director of tonight's entertainment. First of all, a few thanks are in order. First of all, a large thanks to the cast. The amazing work they've put in over the last month has paid off, and I cannot wait for you all to see it tonight. Second of all, a very special thanks to Mrs. Laura Johnson, Mrs. Stephanie Rosario, and a Mrs. Lisa Garwood, our fearless stand-ins, without whom this production would not be what it is tonight. Last of all, a very special thanks to Paper Crane Theatre, who has given us a very generous donation that will allow us to do much of the programming you all enjoy. Cheers. A few reminders for you all. If you look below the video in the description, you will find a link to our GoFundMe. If you like what you see tonight, please consider donating. This will allow us to continue doing the programming you also enjoy, as well as pay our actors. Important things. A few more reminders. After the show, we will be holding a talkback where you will be able to ask myself and the cast any questions you may have. You can post the questions in the comments section of the video, and please do so as the show goes on, as there is a slight delay between what we do and what you see. If you continue to post questions during the show, that allows us to begin answering questions as soon as the curtain call ends. One more reminder that there will be a 5-minute intermission after the first act. Without any further ado, please enjoy The Importance of Being Earnest. Scene: the morning room in Algernon's flat in Half Moon Street. The room is luxuriously and artistically furnished. The sound of a piano is heard in the adjoining room.
Oh my.
Lane is arranging afternoon tea on the table. After the music has ceased, Algernon enters.
Me? Lane, did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. Now, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I leave science for life.
Yes, sir.
And, speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed?
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage as demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage are somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Oh, Ernest, how are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
Oh, what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
You got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them, then. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello? Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in someone so young who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is very well, but I'm afraid that Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you. Ugh.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Oh, how utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted, one usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And a very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. Now, in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lane, bring me that cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Algie, do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up at the moment.
There is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Ah, thank you. Now, I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest. I must say, however, it makes no matter to me, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours at all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk about in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Oh, yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Oh, your aunt then. Your aunt, then?
Yes, and a charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter of surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, But why does your aunt call herself your uncle? Excuse me. Why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I cannot quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it is Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name is Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd. You're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It is on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, P4, the Albany. I will keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me or to Gwendolyn or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
A Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
Well, I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Fine. Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is a perfectly ordinary explanation. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle, for motives of respect that you could possibly not appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Now, where in that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
Well, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in a position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone that can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who haven't been at university. They do it so well in the daily papers. Now, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. And in fact, you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable, permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augustus for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Well, I know. You are absolutely careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not being invited to places.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. And now, in the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or two. Now, in the third place, I know perfectly well whom she is going to place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. Oh, my lord, excuse me. Now, that is not very pleasant, indeed. It is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's own clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I am going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Earnest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury will have a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is a theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half that time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, yes. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be more serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Farifax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Well, I hope I am not that. It would leave very little room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea. And one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come here and sit here, Lady Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mamma. I am quite comfortable where I am.
But good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers!
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Well, I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. Oh, it's delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, but the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill once again. They seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which, in most cases, was probably not much.
I will speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta. Now, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you that he will be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run through the program I have drawn out, if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful, after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are either improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. That always makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak with her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of that fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Ernest first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew that I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Well, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack?
Yeah.
Jack, Jack, Jack. No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually played. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
Well, I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Oh. Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it? I am afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. In the carriage!
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that although you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What, between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature, like Gwendolyn, could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening, at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I've lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am at birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to be He happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
Oh, the line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. And confess, I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems, to me, to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of what the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as a short basis or a recognized position in good society.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. Oh, for goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are.
Well, didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say that Gwendolyn refused you? I mean, I know that it is a way that she has. She is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
But it isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have!
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, they talk about the clever people, of course.
Oh, what fools!
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, my dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, or to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
And what about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You are sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Well, then, my poor brother Ernest to carry off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you had said that... Wasn't Miss Cardew a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest? Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not such a silly romantic girl, I am glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
Well, I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they meet, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. You know it is nearly 7.
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I am hungry.
I never knew when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theatre, maybe?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, then let us go to a club.
Oh, no, I hate talking.
Well, then, we might trot round to the Empire at 10.
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, then, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind doing hard work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
But Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think that I can allow this at all.
Algie, you have always adopted a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
Fine.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something drastic. That, of course, would require serious consideration. I will write to you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you can turn your back now.
Thank you, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Lane? A glass of sherry, Lane?
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I am going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress suits, my smoking jacket, and all of the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, oh, Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into some serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algie. You never talk about anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does, my dear boy.
Okay.
Scene. Garden at the manor house. A flight of grey stone steps leads up to the house. The garden, an old-fashioned one full of roses. Time of year, July. Basket chairs and a table covered with books are set under a large yew tree. Miss Prism discovered seated at the table. Cecily is at the back watering flowers.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as watering of flowers is rather Morton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commanded in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily! I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence the man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of his modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
Keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To you, your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not arrived from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria?
My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have the melodramatic side.
Political economy, horrid geography, horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden, and he said he was anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. Oh, I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I really am not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course. I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though, I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? Oh, I would sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well. The accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself, then, this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. But might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Marshal Neal?
No. I would sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be quite right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
Oh, you are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of a woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. but where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing!
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I've returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful deaths and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead!
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I'm sure he will profit by it.
Charity, Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I, myself, am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, in this present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. Oh, the last time I delivered it was in a cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the caterer, a most hard-working man.
I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I would not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child!
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Earnest! He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we all had been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Earnest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury in his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is my first time coming here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Earnest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Oh, certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel! Out! You must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunbury.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is right.
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
What?
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you as long as you are in mourning. It would be a most unfriendly thing to do. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct is outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her again before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is!
I nearly came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He has gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He is going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced to is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, merry men, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Earnest. That if you will allow me, I will copy remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I would give anything to look at it. May I, please?
Oh, no! You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you should love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense.
Oh, Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him, after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and this is a little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you those? Well, they're very pretty, aren't they?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Earnest. It's the excuse I've always given for you leading such a bad life. And that is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 that you wrote me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, what a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there's the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But, my dear child, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
What name?
Oh, any name you like, really. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not really a bad name at all. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. In fact, half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practices of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Charles Bull is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Well, I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean on most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I will be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss?
Miss Fairfax, I suppose was one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I find it so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that's quite as it should be. Home seems to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of the system. So do you mind looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no. I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange that he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How very secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I first met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little bit older than you appear to be and, not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty to him would be as impossible as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the modern influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never go anywhere without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that, since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once. And with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it until after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Am I late here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea that there are any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
Oh! You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
My own Earnest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily. No, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack. Oh.
Oh, here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what, young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
Oh, you will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Earnest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Earnest, so it is a matter of some importance for us to know where your brother Earnest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you, quite frankly, that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my
Well, you
life.
have no right whatsoever to Bunbury whatsoever here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist, good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in this whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, Algie, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she's my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. That is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins, when we are in this horrible trouble I can't make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except for food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them in all that greedy way.
I wish you would eat tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But now you have just said that it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You cannot possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does, except for vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally would take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It is absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your own case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
Oh, it usedn't to be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I'm going to take both of these. Now, I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth, then, do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algie, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there is still 1 muffin left.
Scene. Morning room at the manor house. Gwendolyn and Cecily are at the window looking into the garden.
The fact that they do not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're approaching! How very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrieff said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
And you think we should forgive them?
Yes! No, I mean no!
True, I have forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
What an excellent idea! I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier.
That is all.
Or Christian names, is that all?
But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd it is to talk of equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are indefinitely beyond us.
Oh, we are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Oh, good heavens.
Gwendolyn! What does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprise, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small token. I followed her once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it improper. But, of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead. Oh.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died himself this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean that he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I meant. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me to considerably above the proper average the statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Here we are. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Spore in Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. Her addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Miss Markby, and Markby.
Markby and Markby? A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew had any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady. Now that I really look at her, few girls of the present day have really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to a young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband didn't recognize her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Ah, yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They are worn very high just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get in do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak so frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint of Perrier Jouet Brut 89 wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin, and what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I really am only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to the evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, It will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So, I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her godfather's will, Miss Cardew does not become legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be still more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know that I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
Oh, my dear Mr. Worthing. As Miss Cardew states, she positively that she cannot wait till she is 35. A remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature. I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolyn, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolyn. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
No, both of these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? Oh, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand that there are no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as of things are now, it would be much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I bear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been, for the last 3 years, Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting there for you for 3 hours.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism! Where is that baby? "28 years ago, Miss Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, up at Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?"
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capricious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in a bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
Well, where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you're not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems very agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
Noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine, yes! Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. This bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother.
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that that is a serious blow, but after all, Who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repent wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Miss Moncrieff, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother! Did I have a brother after all? I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel. You have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
The question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened, that is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot recall at the present moment what the general's Christian name was. But I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the omnibus of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The omnibus of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Let's see. Okay. M. Generals. Okay. Malum, Max V. What ridiculous M names they have. Let's see. Mibs v. Mob. Mibs. Oh, Moncrieff. Lieutenant 1840. Captain, Lieutenant, Colonel, General 1869. Christian names. Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, my name is Earnest after all. I mean, it is naturally Earnest.
Yes. I remember now that the general was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest! My own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
My own one.
Laetitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last!
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We're gonna get going on tonight's talkback. So everybody, go ahead and change your names back to your real names so everyone can see who they're talking to. And do the same because my name is not ... Alrighty, folks. So we have a few questions, and to all you out there sticking around for the talk back, if you come up with anything as we go, feel free to post them and we'll answer them for you. Alrighty. So hopping all the way to the top, here we go. All right. So the first question comes from Shake. Shake writes, so many of my favorite people. Congrats, y'all. I wanted to ask, how was the rehearsal process for this project? What are some things you learned from your character, if anything? So this is something I think we can open up to the cast. Who's got something to throw out there for Shake? Go for it, 80.
My rehearsal process was it was the same length, but there wasn't that as much because my schedule is crazy. Okay, the accent is dead now. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was at maybe like a fraction of the rehearsals, which is, Lady Bracknell has just a handful of appearances as is, so thankfully, but it was really interesting being on the sort of outside of a show, of a production in a way where like, I didn't really get the same sort of we're seeing each other every day camaraderie, I think, other than, it was already there because we're all such lovely people. Y'all are such lovely people specifically. But yeah, I don't know. That was very different to be not physically in rehearsals throughout the whole thing. And then also to like that combined with being virtual was very interesting. Odd.
Go for it, River.
This is my first production with the Resilience Theater Group and also my first virtual production. So this was a really interesting process to be able to learn a little bit more about how things worked and how we were to pass props between each other, how entrances and exits were timed out, along with, of course, some of the physical comedy involved in this when we're states away in some instances. Along with, of course, getting to know, knowing some of these and getting to know some of these really incredible people. In terms of learning from the character, if I remember the second part of that question correctly, Shake Baby, Algernon has a massive confidence and ego that I wish I shared. And so getting to play into that was really very fun. And it gives me something that maybe I can try to tap into on a day-to-day basis. Hopefully not to the nth degree as performed, but who knows?
Anyone else have something to add? Go for it, Brooke.
Hi. So first part of the question, rehearsal process. I think from the start, we all really kind of were on the same page with it, with what our characters were, what the world was like. And I think from there, we were really able to dive into the material, and it was pretty easy to do. And I love working with all these people, and it was really fun. Speaking to the second part with what I learned from my character, I really appreciated playing Cecily in the world currently, because she has this not only naivety, but this just kind of carelessness about her, not in a bad way, but just in a not worrying about everything all the time way. So it was really nice to be able to come to rehearsals after long days and just kind of be like, my character just loves everything, is just like whatever. So I think I also learned from her that I need to take time to just enjoy everything and not be so worried about everything that's going on in life.
That's really wonderful. So we're going to move on to the next question going down. Lisa asked, so much making fun of the upper classes. Did Wilde do this often in his writing? Yes. Oscar Wilde was notorious for this. And an interesting thing about this period of history is that this was at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So in order for the lower classes to make money, they had to become educated, which is something the upper class didn't do because they didn't have to. So in this period of time, the lower classes were far more intelligent than the ultra rich. Anyway, so he could do this and then put it up in front of the rich people who would actually be seeing his plays, and it would completely fly over their heads. He got away with this for most of his life and most of his writing. And it's interesting that, Brooke, you brought up Cecily's kind of carefree attitude. There was a lot of political turmoil going on in England at this time, and I'm a little fuzzy on this, but if I remember correctly, there was a war about to start between England and some other country. And the rich people just didn't care because they didn't have to get involved. So the underlying idea that they're here worrying about what their name is while people are like starving in the streets and being like shot and killed is part of his way of making fun of them. It was this in context to the world around what he was writing. So chugging along to the next one, were any of you familiar with this play and or style before it was considered as a performance possibility? Go for it, Joan.
So Earnest has always had a very special place in my heart because it was actually the first show that I was cast in when I was in college for theater. And 2 weeks into my freshman year, I booked Lady Bracknell, and I learned so much about not only like collegiate acting, but also comedy of manners and classical acting from that process. So when I saw that it was coming up in our season, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is great. I have to audition for it. And it's really fun to be able to play around with, especially like when Gwendolyn and Cecily have the tea scene and manners and courtesy and, you know, the social mores and codes were very different back than they are now. And it's all just kind of like a game. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to do this show again and to always dive back into classical acting, which not all of us get to do all the time.
Yeah. Anyone else have something to add? All right, we're going to chug right along. Steve asks, was it hard developing the right accent for your characters? So what I was able to do for them, at least, is I found this, so everyone has been speaking received pronunciation, which was a version of the British accent that was taught to the upper class to separate them from the lower classes. So there's actually a website that I found, a British website that lists all the vowel shifts, which is essentially where most of the changes in most accents are, for the received like the official vowel shifts for received pronunciation. So that's all I could do, but they can speak on developing the accents. Go for it, Owen. Sure.
Accent work is a really fun process, but I find it to be a little bit difficult. It's a lot more technical than when I started trying to think about accents and voices than I initially expected. And so I am currently studying for my BFA in musical theater at the University of Miami with Brooke, and there are a few graduates here with us as well, being Jacob and Kristen. And it's...
And 80.
And 80. I'm a fucking idiot. Thank you. Oh,
I like to pretend that I am.
I forgot I was.
I'm sorry. But a big part of our training at the U is about accent work. It's about voice and speech work. And it's a really big part of our process. And it's difficult, and it takes work on a daily basis for my part, but it's incredibly fun.
Anybody else want to talk about accent work?
It's hard, and it makes you like feel very like aware of what's coming out of your mouth. You know what I mean? Like if any a time to be like unapologetically confident, like as an actor, which should be all the time, but like if any time, it's when you have to do accent work.
And a real challenge, especially, there's a couple of weird challenges with RP, one of which being something called the ask list. So if you notice in RP, people say ask, and there's just a random list of words where the a vowel turns a little bit farther into and it's totally arbitrary. It's just a list. So there's that. And then something I find when I'm doing my own accent work, when I'm acting, is if I'm doing like Italian or French or some European language that uses the same alphabet, if you pronounce the vowels and the letters in the way they pronounce them when they speak it, in other words, read English, but in Italian, if that makes sense, it makes it really easy, because if you understand how the language works, you can get the accent out. But the thing with the British accent is that we speak it. There's no real language thing causing the shifts. It's just a learned thing that the British decided to do to separate the classes, and that's rough. Does anyone have anything else to add? Alrighty, chugging right along. Laura asks, how long, how many rehearsals did it take for you to feel comfortable in your developed character? Who wants to take this one? It's a hard question. Go for it, Max.
There's something that you do sometimes in a rehearsal process called a speed through. And that is when you go through the run of the show like super, super fast, like so fast that you're still acting, but you can't think about anything else besides like what's happening. And I think that when we did our first speed through, that was a real like awakening moment for, I don't think I'm just speaking for myself, in saying like, okay, like we've identified the tone collectively, and it sort of, when you do that, it invites you to like do some more in-depth work with your character yourself.
Absolutely. The speed-throughs are really interesting in how informative they were, not just for the cast, but for me as well. Because when we did the first speed-through, when this language is clunky, it's hard to make move. So we did the first speed-through, and it kind of turned into, well, that's the pace we need to be going. And there was a lot of like not only character discovery, but when you are forced to rush through that many words as fast as possible, it forces urgency and it helps build the stakes of the scene. So there was a lot of like, whether y'all noticed it or not, I certainly watched you guys make a lot of discoveries, and it was very exciting for me to be able to see happen. Anyone else have something to add? Awesome. All right, we're gonna chug right along. So Max and Joan and Adi and I, this is a question for us. What was the process that went into choosing this play to perform? Max and Joan, this is your brainchild. So by the way, they are the co-artistic directors of the company. So this was their project. So if you guys want to speak on it, go for it.
Max, you want to take this one, or I cannot wait. Yes. I'll go ahead. So,
clearly, you're getting a good taste of it.
I feel like a couple of different things went into actually choosing this play. And like Jacob said, me and Max are co-artistic advisors for RTG right now, which is actually super great, because Max will oversee more like acting directorial side, and then I am like the liaison for the Citadel of Playwrights, and we both come together to help with brainstorming for the season and trying to decide what would be best. And one of the main things that we were thinking about doing Earnest coming in was that with everything that was going on right now, it was light, and it was enjoyable, it was entertaining, but it was also a social commentary in a bit of an abstract way, but Oscar Wilde was making comments, and it also, doing this show in this period, left us room in the rest of our season to do a little bit more like daring stuff, which has always been our goal, is to kind of put up the work that excites us and that we feel like is really reflecting the society that we're living in. So I feel like it was a great start to a season that's just going up.
And I feel like this is a fantastic segue, Max, if you would like. We have a full season, and we are in the midst of our rights acquisitions with the licensing companies. So Max, if you want to let the people know what our next season is going to be.
Absolutely. So yeah, like Joan said, this play, Importance of Being Earnest, really like is a lighthearted and like fun way to sort of look outward into the world. And I think now we have something else coming in next that also looks very outward, but in a completely different tone. So the next thing that we have coming up is Eugene O'Neill's The Hairy Ape. That is directed by Adie, who played Lady Bracknell tonight. And then the season ends with a couple things that sort of like turn inward a little bit. We're doing things that are sort of like coming of age stories, you know what I mean? So in February, I will be directing Lauren Gunderson's I and You, which is just a really beautiful contemporary play. And we are closing with Dance Nation by Claire Barron, which is going to be directed by Jacob and myself. And alongside those 3 additional productions that we'll be doing, there's going to be a lot of really exciting programming coming from the Citadel as well. A lot of special programming that is theater and that is like production oriented, but is not necessarily established work already. So there's really something for everybody. And I really hope that everybody responds to the story that we're putting together over this whole year. It's going to be great. So if you don't follow our social media already, make sure you do that so you can get updated about when shows are, learn a little bit more about the different shows that we're doing, all that kind of stuff.
And something else to throw out there, if you watch these and you like what you see and you want to become a bit more involved, we're starting conversations about community outreach. So follow, because there will start to be opportunities for people to start dipping their hands in.
At the Resilience Theater Group on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also check out our website, which we should link, but it is, just so we have it, resilienctheater.wixsite.com/group. Check it out.
And then I also realized that a couple of us have been throwing out the term the Citadel without really giving some context. So for our friends who are watching that don't know what we're referencing, the Resilience Theater Group is in partnership with another company that was founded by RTG member Kristen Ragusa, who played Miss Prism. Unfortunately, she had to go. But it is a new work development company dedicated not only to developing new work by playwrights, but also dedicated to supporting the playwright in any way that we can. And we hope to have social media and stuff for that coming soon. But that was what we meant when we were discussing the Citadel. And we hope to kind of merge programming a little bit, as much as we can.
Absolutely.
The next season.
Chugging right along, we got, I think, 1 or 2 more questions. Lisa asks, how much rehearsal did it take to do the wonderful passing of the cake? It's so clever. So if you guys want to talk on that, and then I think we'd be remiss to answer this question without also mentioning your fight with the cigarette case. So Brooke and Joan, take it away, and then we'll shift focus.
Yeah, so the cake passing, I honestly don't think it took us that long to figure out. I think Jacob was very articulate when he first explained it to us, and then it was just a matter of actually like running it and doing it like once or twice. But it's a very clever way of being in the same space while you're in different Zoom boxes in different states across the country, whatever, but being able to like have something where it's kind of like a linked action with another person is, I think it's a clever thing, and it was fun to do. It was pretty simple, I think.
And the convenient thing about doing a handoff like that is you just have to pick which side each person is on. So when we were working with Kat, it was Cecily and Gwendolyn. So as long as you keep that consistent, all you have to do is make your hand disappear and time the grabs. But being that they're grabs, you can just hover there until the other person takes it. There was some extra challenges with the cigarette case fight because there was no passing off. And when you do something like this, so here's the key. I'm in New Jersey. Owen is in Miami. And Ashton, who played Jack tonight, who unfortunately had to leave, is in New York. So I see I see Ashton's input faster than I get Owen's input, and Owen gets my input faster than he gets Ashton's input. So a lot of it was a game of timing. And if you want to talk about how we figured that out, Owen, go.
In all honesty, we have not stopped rehearsing it. We ran it again during call tonight. Like, we have not stopped rehearsing. Just every little throw, every little movement until probably we're going to do it again tomorrow. Like, it is akin to a fight call at this point. It is essentially a fight call.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the tool that we used to kind of link up the timing despite the delays that we had was a stage combat concept where there's somewhat of a wind up where you need to lock eyes so you know the person's ready to, take the punch. So if you look carefully, when Jack was about to grab, he did a wind up where his hand popped up here for a sec. So when Owen saw that, he knew to just, because it gave him just enough time to react.
Just enough. It's very tight timing. And like I said, we're still rehearsing it until now. And I mean, it's one of my favorite parts of the show, in all honesty. It's one of the silliest, one of my favorite gags that we do, and I just so greatly enjoy getting to mess with Ashton just a little bit more than I would usually, as given in the script.
The beauty of getting to do that in this is that when this show is normally staged, during that part, they're like chasing each other around the room and over furniture, and it's ridiculous. But this is our way of doing that. Things like knocking over the camera and spinning around in chairs is the closest we can get. But they worked so hard to get it right. And y'all saw it. It worked. All right. Chugging right along to the next question. Joan, this one is for you. Shake asks, did you take inspiration from Lady Mary Crawley of Downton for your interpretation of Gwendolyn? Because the realness is everything, darling.
First of all, Shake, I love you and miss you. You have my whole heart. Ugh, my heart. So funny thing, I've actually never seen Downton Abbey, ever. I've never seen Downton Abbey. I've never seen Game of Thrones. And that's not the first time I've been asked if I've drawn inspiration from a Downton Abbey character. So now I'm like, well, I have to watch it. But no, yeah, I don't know if I really had any kind of like direct inspiration for Gwendolyn. I just played around with different things until I found her. And I could not agree with what Max said more. The day that we all did the first speed through was the day that I found like Gwendolyn's true tempo, and finding her tempo, like I just was able to settle right in, and that's how she came to be. But for you, Shake, I'll watch Downtown for you.
All right. So there apparently a bunch of questions have been sent in during this. So we are going to lightning round because there's like 6 more. The first one being Shake once again asks the whole cast, what are some challenges you face while developing your character? Let's get one person. Go for it, 80.
Lady Bracknell is a very interesting character for people our ages to play. Because I think the impulse would be to slow down and make everything quiet and still as possible and everything, but that is something that's very hard to make, that's very hard to believe on a young body as opposed to an old body. But then at the same time, you don't want to veer off too far into like caricature land. So that was a hard line to try and negotiate.
All righty. So the next one comes from Lisa. Once again, how long did it take you to really feel comfy in your character's skins? Brooke, you want to take this one?
Yes. To be completely honest, it wasn't until really Tech Week, especially like Wednesday of Tech Week, just because I also had been not present at some rehearsals due to scheduling conflicts. So for me, it really clicked Wednesday when we did like a full run through of the show. It was my first full run through of the show, and just having that energy of like going through the entire thing, I think that's when the character really clicked in for me and I got it.
Fabulous. So the next one comes from Lauren Dockett. Says, loved it, virtual and all. Timing very impressive despite the distancing. How did we manage it? It's really a game of taking the air out from the middle of the lines, because there's only so much we can do about how long things transmit. So it's a matter of, while still remaining clear, getting the words out at a speed, because it's so dense. You read the script and these lines are massive and the words are huge and it's elevated old language. So that was at least my biggest direction about taking the air out from in the middle of the lines. What's up, River?
I just want to add right on into that, because something that I feel like we all found separately was that the best timing to start a line so that there's as little air between them as possible is when you hear the very last word of the preceding line to yours, you jump in as fast as you can. At least mine was usually the very last word. I jumped in right on that, because it's a little difficult to try to take the air out when we might have connectivity issues. I know, like, during a little bit of this run, my video was a little jumpy, so I just always knew, just wait for that last word, and when you need to, you'll be in, and that'll be fine. Like, it helps to keep everything running as smoothly as possible, even when our internet might not be the best in the world.
That's so good. I didn't even know you were doing that. I gotta remember that.
My internet didn't like me today, but that's fine.
That's really clever. I had no idea. Let's see. Is there anything else? So much. That looks like that's everything. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for watching tonight. We had so much fun answering your questions. I had a lot of fun watching the show tonight. Thank you all for continuing to support us, and we hope to see you at future productions. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.